Hi, everybody. Welcome back to COMM1160. This is week number 9. And this week, we're going to start our big project that we're going to be spending a number of weeks on. Today, we're going to start with crafting a thesis statement and crafting an outline. Just in terms of some stuff, though, for this week, whoops, I moved the slide over too fast. There we go. I just want to let you know what's coming up. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be preparing to write an essay that's based on your topic choice for the research file. So you completed your research file on a disease or a condition, and I mentioned that you wanted to narrow your focus either to symptoms or treatments for that disease or condition. We're going to work through creating an essay on the symptoms or the treatments for the disease or condition that you've chosen. Everyone now has received their graded research file back with feedback. So if you haven't checked that out, please do make sure to take a look because there is some feedback there for each person individually. I took a look at everybody's research file and the research that they had collected. I do want to reassure you that I'm not assigning the essay at this point. We are going to go through essay writing in chunks. So we're going to start this week by looking at the thesis statement and the outline. Next week, we're going to take a look at the rough draft, and then we'll take a look at the final draft. So don't get confused or don't panic. I'm not assigning a full essay to you right now. We're just going to cover the thesis statement and the outline. And you will have an assignment due that's associated with the videos that we're going through for this week. And that assignment is going to be an outline that's going to contain a thesis statement. And it's going to be due on Friday, November the 19th by midnight. I'm recording this video in the evening, and it's kind of a cool evening. So I treated myself to a latte. I suggest that you pour yourself something warm, seeing as it's getting cold. So a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, a hot chocolate, and settle in. And we'll go through the material for this week, and I'll give you full instructions about the assignment that's coming up. Okay, so I asked you to do some reading a couple weeks back to prepare for writing the essay. And what we're going to be doing is essentially writing a mini essay. So we're going to be writing a 5-paragraph essay, 5 or more paragraphs. That's going to contain an introduction, some body paragraphs, and a conclusion. But before we even get to writing, we need to do some planning. And that's where this week's work is going to come in. We're going to start looking at thesis statements first of all. And thesis statements really are the heart of your paper. I want to reassure you, though, that thesis statements are not as difficult as they may initially seem. So I know that when I was in post-secondary and these concepts were being introduced to me, I was really confused about what thesis statements were and what they weren't. And nobody really explained to me, what a thesis statement is when you actually boil it right down. It really is not complicated. It's literally a statement, so a sentence of what you're going to show or prove in an essay. And it defines the purpose of your writing. Okay, that's all it is. And it's used in an essay introduction. So it's a sentence that eventually appears in an essay introduction. And it should be your first step every time that you start planning. Okay, so as you sit down and you're planning to write, the thesis statement should be the first thing that you turn your attention to because it's the heart and it's going to control everything that you do moving forward. So if you have a solid thesis statement, you're probably going to end up with a really solid essay. How do you write one though? Okay, and again, for me, this was always the problem. I would sit down with a pen and some paper and rack my brain about how to come up with a thesis statement. I have come up with a process that I'm going to introduce you to that I think really, really works. And it involves going through your research and dumping some ideas and then looking for pattern. Okay, so the first thing I suggest when you're crafting a thesis statement is to begin by brainstorming and literally dumping ideas from your research. So for example, I'm just going to go into Word and open up a blank document for you here. So for example, let's say I were working on an essay, I'll pick something that everybody knows a lot about, the flu. Okay. What I would do, and normally I do this by hand. I'm just, again, the type of person that likes to work by hand more than typing. But what I would do then is sit down with my cup of coffee or my cup of tea, and go through all of the material that I've gathered, look at the summaries that I've written, look at my Cornell notes, and literally just start dumping information, okay, in point form. It's going to help me sort of visualize, okay, what it is that I'm working on. So let's say, for example, I were working on an essay that was symptoms of the flu. I would go through my research and I would come up with symptoms. So one symptom might be sore throat, headache, okay, eye pain, fatigue. I'm thinking about every time I've had the flu and what I've experienced. Earache. What else? Fever, of course. You might have stuff like, I hate to say it, diarrhea. You might have abdominal cramps as well. You might have depression, right? So you might have some psychological symptoms that come into play as well. You could end up with body aches. You could end up with, I'm trying to think what else. Oh, yeah, stuffy nose, runny nose. What else happens? I wish we were all together because you could shout out some answers for me here. I'm trying to think here as well. Let's say hallucinations, right? If your fever is high enough, you might start hallucinating. Trying to think here, what else? I'll just throw in, I'm not sure if this is sort of starting to make stuff up now. I'll throw in constipation as a symptom. Maybe you end up with, I don't know why I'm thinking about all these bathroom things, but maybe you end up with gas. In any event, you would be going through, okay, your research and pulling, okay, the various symptoms that you're seeing discussed. That's your first step. So it just helps you map out, okay, all of the different symptoms or treatments that you've learned about from all of your reading. And like I said, it helps you visualize it. Then your next step, once you've gone through that process, okay, is to take those brainstorming ideas and establish categories or look for patterns within the information. Because it's categories or patterns that you see in the information that are going to help you write a really solid thesis statement. So if I were to go back to my list, okay, and take a look, I would look for ways that I could group symptoms together. So all of these symptoms that I've listed here, I'm going to try to find a way to stuff them into a category, okay? So that I'm not just talking about what little individual symptoms, but I found a way to group them. Okay? And if I look through this list about the flu, there are some definite ways that I could group the material. And I'll just give you a minute here to look at the list, all right, to think about how you might group these various symptoms together. I think if you're thinking along the way that I am, that there's three particular groups that come out, or three particular patterns that come out when you're looking at this list of symptoms. And the first would be ear, nose, and throat symptoms. Okay, so I'm going to call them ENT symptoms. So stuff like the sore throat, the eye pain, the stuffy nose, the running nose, the earache. All of these are ear, nose, and throat symptoms that a person experiences during the flu. The next thing that I'm going to take a look at, okay, includes all of this stuff here: diarrhea, abdominal cramps, constipation, gas. Right? All of these, if we put them into medical terms, are GI or gastrointestinal symptoms of the flu. So I could group those four things together. And then finally, I'm going to look for a third category. And I'm going to look and I'm going to say, okay, hallucinations, depression. I could call these psychological symptoms. Now, some of these things are not going to fit into my category. So fatigue doesn't fit into my category. Body aches doesn't fit into my category. I'm not necessarily going to, forget about these things, but I probably won't refer to them in my essay because I want to talk about stuff in groups so that I have enough information to actually generate paragraphs and generate ideas. But if I, again, look, right, I'll see, wow, I've got, right, 3 categories here that I could of symptoms that I could talk about. Same thing if you were doing treatments, right? So it might be stuff like pharmaceutical treatments, medications. It might be stuff like exercise treatments, okay, that people could do. It might be stuff like self-care treatments that people could do, alternative treatments. Depends on what you found. But really, what you want to do is you want to list out all of those symptoms or treatments and then look for pattern. Look for a way to categorize. Once you do that, writing the thesis statement actually becomes really easy because you can move from your discussion of pattern into a thesis statement really, really easily. And this is where the magic comes in, okay, of following this process. So you've identified, hopefully, 3 or 4 different categories or groups, okay, of things that you're going to talk about, either symptoms or treatments. Now you can use what I like to call a magic thesis statement generator, okay, and it works almost like a math problem. X can be identified by the presence of A, B, and C. So if we were to go back to my example of the flu, right, I could say the flu, which is my X, can be identified by the presence of A, ENT symptoms, B, GI symptoms, and C, psychological symptoms. Boom, I have a thesis statement. I've identified my topic. I've identified why my topic is significant, that it can be identified by the presence of certain things. And then I've identified my variables. I like to call them variables, but my groupings, okay, my patterns that I've found in the information. And I can do the same when I'm talking about treatments. So I could say X can be treated with A, B, and or C. And again, going back, okay, to the patterns or the groups of information that I've identified. So say, for example, we'll just fast forward. We haven't done the brainstorming, but I might say something like the flu can be treated with antibiotics, antivirals, and vitamins. Okay, boom, simple, direct, really strong thesis statement every single time. And it really comes down to just that brainstorming and identifying pattern, making your brain see commonalities among things before you actually start writing. I'm going to ask you as well to see the thesis statement handout that's under course documents, because I think that's really helpful. And it goes over exactly the kind of stuff that I've just been talking about. Once you've done that, I'm going to ask you to stop at this point and with your cup of coffee, okay, take 30 minutes right now, dig through your research, map out your ideas, find those patterns or categories, and you want to aim to find 3 or 4 categories or patterns, and then draft a basic thesis statement. It doesn't need to be anything fancy, as long as it's strong and it identifies the topic, okay, so what it is that you're going to be discussing, and the variables that you're going to identify or share with the reader. You're going to end up with a great thesis statement. So good luck with that. In our next video, we're going to start talking about outlining, and you're going to be using the thesis statement that you've drafted to create your outline. I'll talk to you in our next video.